থ্যাংক ইউ BSPS এই ইনিশিয়েটিভটা নেওয়ার জন্য। আমি মনে করি যে দিস ইজ এ রিলেটিভলি নিউ কনসেপ্ট ইন দ্য বাংলাদেশ কনটেক্সট। এখানে পত্রপত্রিকায় সেইভাবে মানে অ্যাজ এ শ্যাডো ব্যাংকিং কনসেপ্ট হিসাবে এই জিনিসটা নিয়ে অত বেশি আলোচনা হয় না। উই অল talk a lot about financial inclusion issue. We talk about regulatory issues, কারণ there has been a lot of regulatory failures in certain areas, যেটার ফলে বিভিন্ন রকমের অর্গানাইজেশন যেটা ফাইন্যান্সিয়াল ম্যাটার নিয়ে ডিল করেছে, ডিপোজিট নিয়েছে, কিন্তু বিভিন্ন স্ক্যামের মাধ্যমে তারা ডেমোলিস্ট হয়ে গেছে এবং অনেক লোকে ক্ষতিগ্রস্ত হয়েছে। তখন আমরা এসব নিয়ে আলোচনা করি, কিন্তু একটা সিস্টেমেটিক এফার্ট যেটাকে কিভাবে রেগুলেশনের আন্ডারে আরো আনা যায়, ভালোভাবে আনা যায় উইদাউট আন্ডারমাইনিং ইনোভেশন, দ্যাটস দ্য ব্যালেন্সিং জব। আর সেই রেসপেক্টে আমি মনে করি যে দ্য কনসেপ্ট অফ ম্যাপিং দ্যাট Ahsan Habib has proposed is a very good idea, and it can be done by organization like BSPS and or by Bangladesh Bank or by some other organization like government finance ministry can also undertake that initiative under the banking division. But somebody needs to do it. Somebody needs to do it because you know what the definition that the term that IMF paper used is something like that. If it looks like a duck, it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, then it should be a duck. But in principle, we see they walk like a bank, they operate like a bank, they do everything like a bank, but they are not bank. And that is an uncomfortable situation. So we don't want to see a quacking duck not being a duck. So that's where the discomfort comes in. And what we'd like to see, আমরা যেটা দেখতে চাই সেটা হচ্ছে যে এই shadow banks are going to be over. They will exist, but must need to exist in an environment যেটা আমাদের রিস্ক মিটিগেশনে সাহায্য করবে, যেটা আমাদের ইনক্লুশনকে আরো ব্রডার করবে এবং টেকনোলজি অ্যাডাপশনকে আরো ফ্যাসিলিটেট করবে। কারণ আলটিমেটলি আমার যেটা মনে হয়, আমি ওয়ার্কিং ইন দ্য BRAC bank as well, that point I emphasize always in our board, that it is the technology that will drive down cost, that will allow us to reach to broader segment of the population. We cannot do it in the conventional way that we have been doing it. If you look at the risk that we are talking about, the kind of risk that US has experienced, ওটা আমাদের দেশে হয়তো ওইভাবে হবে না। আমাদের দেশে ওই সাবপ্রাইম লেন্ডিং টাইপস, রিসিকিউরিটাইজেশন, অ্যাসেট ব্যাক ইনস্ট্রুমেন্টস, এই ধরনের জিনিস আমাদের কম আছে, because we are not that developed financially. And that is the one comfortable part, as a it's like we are not that rich, so we are not going to be robbed. So that's the kind of a situation. We don't have that sophisticated market, but that is not a comfort. That is something that we are lacking, that kind of a development, and so we are kind of a comfort zone that is not going to impact us. But today or tomorrow, these innovations are going to come, and they will take place, and we have to be prepared for them. We don't want a heavy-handed approach, certainly not, but a soft touch, a good governance must prevail. আমরা যেটা দেখতে পাই, যেমন চায়নার কথাটাই ধরি আমি, কন্টেম্পোরারি, এটা গ্লোবাল ইকোনমিক ক্রাইসিসের পরের ঘটনা, সেখানে আমরা দেখতে পাই যে শ্যাডো ব্যাংকিং হ্যাজ রিয়েলি সার্জড, and it is serving a large community of SMEs in particular, এবং আরো যেটা হচ্ছে যে ইনফর্মাল সেক্টর, যেখানে তাদের ফর্মাল ব্যাংকগুলো যাচ্ছে না। চাইনিজ ব্যাংকস আর মনস্টারাস ব্যাংকস, দে আর $4 trillion asset-based banks. There are 4 of them in the top 10. That being said, they're still not serving the community of SMEs and micro and cottage segment. So that's where these elements, these shadow banks are playing a big role. How big are they? For example, in case of China, at least they have statistics. In our case, we don't have the statistics, consolidated kind of thing. Their estimate is that about 8.1 trillion, or 40% of the size of the banking system assets. So this is a huge 8.1 trillion is not a matter of joke. I mean, it's a How many times of Bangladesh? It's like 25 times of Bangladesh total GDP. And even in the Chinese context, it's a 60% plus Chinese GDP. So that's a huge asset base. In Bangladesh, our banking system asset is currently less than 60%. So you can imagine the size of the shadow bank is extremely large in that economy. Now, the issue is that we need to manage this. In Bangladesh, what's happening? Bcash is coming in. Bcash is an extension of Alibaba. It has the backing of the technology. It has that because it's a strategic partner, it can infuse that. Same thing with Nagad. It's a foreign partnership there, also blessed with the government support. The regulatory even-handedness is issue that comes in with that, because once government is part of is a player, it's very often in a country like Bangladesh, the regulator cannot be impartial. But we must avoid that kind of treatment. Even I was attending one webinar where the Nagad representative was saying that, well, we are a government entity, and Bangladesh law says that it's a government entity must be given priority over any private entity. That's nonsense. It cannot be. You have to operate in an even playing field, and everybody should be allowed to operate in that field at even terms, so that every competition prevails and consumers get the best benefit. Now, the issue of risk management, issue of couple of things. What is the macro in financial institutions that we have all over Bangladesh? MRA has been established to manage them. Are they doing a good job? That's something that needs to be evaluated. We don't know. I don't know at least that how good a job they are doing. Of course, the big institutions like Grameen Bank or BRAC or a few others will be doing a good job, but there are hundreds of other players. Their balance sheet position, their actual situation is really unknown, and that can also create a risk for the depositors, because they take deposits as well, and that's a phenomenon locally, but at the same time, some of them have a lot of borrowing from the banking system as well. So that's also create a systemic risk for the banks. So we need to look at those shadow banking operations like microcredit institutions. I'm not saying that you shut them off, but you have to be watchful about their effective operations, how they are functioning, and to what extent we need to extend the regulatory supervision more or less. I don't know, but we have to make an assessment on that adequacy of our current level. I'm not too concerned about agent banking. This is not a shadow operation because it's part of the bank. It's part of the bank, and bank owns them of those operations. Banks take the risks, and the risks are like a macro operation. It's a small risk all over. To what extent it constitutes a risk for systemic risk for each of those banks, that needs to be evaluated, and Bangladesh Bank should of course look into that. But at the end of the day, it should come under the purview of Bangladesh Bank Regulatory Authority equally, not anything less. And the parent bank should be responsible in its balance sheet to capture those. It should not be off balance sheet item, which a typical shadow bank. So I'm not. I would think that the agent banking should not be seen as a off balance sheet item of any bank, and it should be part of their balance sheet item, and it should not be characterized as a shadow banking, because it should be, in that case, it's part of the banking operation. And what I am concerned about is that, and I'm not concerned, it's an innovation that has to happen. I believe that banks and MFIs will face increasing competition from the mobile financial services. It's going to happen. And now, and the experimentation that's going on globally as well with digital banking, that is going to pose a challenge for both the banks and for other non-banks in Bangladesh as well. So those areas needs to be their regulatory arrangement needs to be looked at very carefully. We know that Hong Kong Monetary Authority has given digital banks permission. They're big banks. Basically, they're tech-based banks, and they are regulated in Hong Kong exactly like the bank. No difference. Exact same thing. In China, they have not yet set out the regulations, but said that the banking regulation will apply to them. There's no need to do a separate regulatory authority, separate regulatory rules and things. So what I'm trying to say is that regulation, innovations are going to take place. The way we see the banking system in Bangladesh today, or the financial system in Bangladesh today, the microcredit institutions, much of them will be wiped out. Only a few will survive. Secondly, I see that these institutions, which are not banks, which are shadow bank, you can call them, or MFS as it is called now, they will become major stakeholder in future financial inclusion and also in size and operations. If you look at the Chinese WeBank or MyBank, backed by tech companies, Alibaba and Tencent, and they're growing fast. They're going for few-second loan approval process. They use tremendous data mining capacity using the social networking that they use, WeChat and other framework, social networking, and the transaction networking that is done through WeChat and other means. So they have tremendous access to data sources, which they use. And the traditional way the banks operate, they are not in an advantageous position to capture those data unless the banks shape up their activity. So we will be facing challenges from this kind of innovations. They have to be accommodated. You cannot push them back. We have to accommodate those and frame the regulation in such a way that these operations also thrive and provide the competitive environment much better way, not lesser competition. We don't want less competition. We want the banks to face the music as well. I tell my own board that, look, if we cannot bring down our operation cost in such a way that at 9% interest we can give to the SMEs, then we will not be doing proper banking. And we have to do it, only way to do it is technological innovation, to reduce the cost structure and compete with other players who will be coming, the digital banks in future. So we need to be aware of those considerations. I fully support the mapping recommendation. I think it's a must. And in that mapping of these institutions and the range of institutions, we can categorize them. And we should also, in that context, categorize on the basis of risk criteria. They are what you call systemic risk issues. Their capacity, their mismatch of maturity and structure, what kind of risk that poses. So all these issues should come in that mapping. Absolutely, there is no alternative to some kind of regulatory monitoring. I think that our regulators should be forward-looking, not reactive but proactive. Things are happening which calls for Bangladesh Bank or any other regulatory agency to become much more proactive now, and do these kinds of futuristic thinking, with sitting with the stakeholders to derive what kind of regulation, what kind of flexible, but at the same time ensuring the safety and security of the depositors and whoever investing in those, that to be ensured. So self-monitoring, I am not so sure that to what extent Bangladesh is ready for self-monitoring. So far, my experience with our corporate sector, with our institutions, is that they are never so proactive to govern themselves in a way that disciplines their own members. I wish it changed. I'm wrong, but unfortunately, that's the way our society is. We don't want to be self-regulated. We always try to beat each other, cheat each other, and that environment does not help self-regulation. So I'm a little bit skeptic about self-regulation. It can be a temporary interim arrangement, but I think that given my understanding of our own systems and institutions, we need some kind of a regulatory framework that is to be framed in consultation with the institutions, all the players now and in future, and be forward-looking, try to be dynamic, try to take into consideration that never undermines innovations. Innovations has to be there. Safeguards has to be in while protecting the innovation and financial inclusion progress on that front intact. So I will stop at this for now. Thank you.